This is the Bathurst Quay Neighbourhood. Bathurst Quay is a high-density, mixed-income community. To the north is the Gardiner Expressway, and across the Western Gap is Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport. Planes take off from between 6:45 in the morning and 11 o'clock at night. So sandwiched between these two traffic sources, it's little wonder that people in the neighborhood are wondering what about the air quality in the neighborhood where they live.
We face the airport, so we're one of the closest units to the airport, and the amount of black dust that collects on the blinds and everything is it's quite significant. As I think too often in the city we just assume, well, it's polluted because we live in a city, but I think where we are in between the airport and a major highway, I think we end up being a bit of a bowl for some of the air pollution.
This is not an appropriate place for an airport. We have too many young children, we have too many people who have health problems, issues, and the children that go to the school here are right next to the airport, and it annoys me, the added traffic, which is, oh, but it's so lovely to fly out. You're just a NIMBY, but it's not just a NIMBY, it's our health.
It's affecting the air quality, it's affecting the quiet enjoyment, it's affecting the communities, it's affecting people bike riding, listening to music. And it will continue to pollute our waterfront in every aspect.
I'm Joan Krause. I've lived in the Bathurst Quay neighbourhood for more than 30 years. I'm also chair of our neighbourhood association. Like a lot of people, we're wondering what was the impact of having an airport and a highway so close to our community. So we went on a search to find some answers.
Hi everyone, I'm Marianne Hatzopoulou.
Fortunately, we found Marianne and a whole team of researchers at the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering. They launched a study of air pollution in the Bathurst Quay neighbourhood, a community they identified as a transportation hotspot.
In 2019, Joan reached out and some other representatives from BQ&A reached out and said, let's put together, let's bring people around the table, let's bring the airport, let's bring the city around the table, let's actually try and investigate and see, are there any influences of the airport on local air quality in the neighborhood? Are there other sources of air pollution in the neighborhood from the highway? And let's try and understand what people in the neighborhood are exposed to in terms of air pollution. And also let's try and disseminate that knowledge, like what we're doing today, in meaningful ways, in ways that can help nudge policy, in ways that can help, facilitate meaningful conversations.
First of all, the prospects of working with the community and having a community-led study was very exciting. I think a lot of the times we tend to undermine the value of community input, especially in science, but communities are there and they are human sensors of that environment they're living in, and their insights are extremely valuable to the studies. That was also very interesting because I was very curious about regional airports, small-scale airports, and highly close to local communities, and whether we could actually detect the influence of such an infrastructure.
The study was launched in 2019 and took 5 years to complete. These are the highlights of the findings.
All right, so where did we do our measurements? So we had a measurement location at the rooftop of Arcadia, Windward, at the ferry terminal, and at the yacht club. There's a reference monitoring station at Hanlan's Point. And that monitoring station for air pollution is very important for our study. Why? Predominant wind directions are southwesterly in the neighborhood and in general, right? Predominant wind directions are southwesterly. So this is why when the wind is blowing from the southwest, if you look at, the air mass coming into the city, it will hit Hanlan's Point before it does the ferry terminal or Arcadia building. So we can actually look at the differences, okay? And so what we're seeing here is when the wind is blowing from the south, the levels are around more than 30,000. When the wind is blowing from the north, the levels are around 10,000, right? So clearly now we are starting to detect, right, that airport effect. But now we're adding to the mix Hanlon's Point. And now we're also looking at southerly wind. So now the wind is blowing from the south. At Hanlon Point, the level is 10,000. At the ferry terminal, the level goes up to 31,000. And at Arcadia, the level drops down to 18,500, right? So we really are able now to start kind of honing down on that effect, that somewhere between Hanlon's Point and the ferry terminal, there's some source that is generating ultrafine particles that are added to this background level. Ultrafine particles are PM 0.1 or 100 nanometers. They're very, very small. The reason why a lot of us in air pollution research are becoming interested in them is, first of all, because they're so small, they don't just stop in the respiratory tract. They are able to penetrate the bloodstream, and they're able to interact at like the intracellular level. There's been studies about them crossing the blood-brain barrier. There's a lot of studies. There's not yet a lot of convincing evidence to drive policy or regulation. This is why there's no ambient air quality standards for ultrafine yet in Canada. But the World Health Organization has issued what they call a good practice statement. And they basically said that high UFPs can be considered as anything more than 10,000 particles per cubic centimeter. So in a cubic centimeter of air, anything more than 10,000 particles that is lasting about 24 hours, an average over 24 hours, is considered high. And anything that is more than 20,000 for an hour is considered high. They're not standard, they're sort of what we call good practice statement. And this is where we see a lot of the science. A lot of the research is sort of starting to build up this evidence, right, around ultrafine particles, their levels in urban areas, their health effects. And eventually, I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years we actually are going to start seeing, standards for ultrafine particles. So again, remember that this study is beyond, right? This is a science study. This study is going to contribute to this big scientific conversation, right, around ultrafine particles in airports. So what you're seeing here, I'm showing you what we call a time series that is going from June 21st, Tuesday, June 21st, all the way to July 5th, okay? And every 5 minutes, you're seeing a different level. The reason why I'm showing that as a background is because if you superimpose on that for the exact same times, the ultrafine particles at Arcadia, what you're basically seeing is they're sort of around the same levels, except that sometimes there are some spikes, right? Very short duration, and they shoot up to, like really high levels, and they're very, very short duration. Now, if we superimpose on top of that the ferry terminal, right, you actually see, again, highly correlated, because there's a regional component, right? Not all the UFP is coming, from one source. There is a lot of it that's mixing, but then it's really the evidence of these like very high, those massive spikes that we were able to kind of correlate these spikes with landing and takeoff cycle at the airport, right? They're very short. This is why, again, like I say, when you take the average of these lines, those averages are basically that 31,000 and 18,500, right? It doesn't seem like the difference is so big, but then when you look at the spikes, this is where you have those like massive departures, right, in ultrafine particles. Now, what do we recommend? Where do we go from here? What are our team's recommendations? I think the first one is we do recommend the use of simulation tools, but the use of these kind of tools can help us in scenario analysis. You can start changing parameters. You can start saying, what if scenarios? What if the schedule of landing and takeoff changes? What if the days of the week where the airport is busiest changes? What if we have hotter days or colder days? What if we have more southerly winds or less? So you could look at all different scenarios and then analyze their impacts on air quality in the neighborhood. I think we need to continue evaluating the feasibility of ways to reduce UFP exposure in the community. We definitely need more research on ultrafine particles. This is a recommendation of our study. Considering UFP exposure when planning future changes to airport operations, right? And I think this is a recommendation for a lot of major transportation infrastructures. When we look at air quality, we need to try and start moving a little bit away from the regulated air pollutants solely and start branching into these new species that are still under research, because there's a lot to learn from these kind of studies. And again, we said gather input from residents on possible follow-up actions to consider, and we had a wonderful workshop with great recommendations that we have summarized in our executive summary. And I think a lot of people were mentioning the idea of, continued monitoring, continued measurement, right? Idea of continuous improvement, continue to better understand and characterize the situation.
I think it's very important to continue pursue monitoring. It's important to have access to be closer to the airport, to be closer to the tarmac, to be able to really identify the gross emitters, the kind of activities that are generating the most pollution. But we're definitely at the point where we're saying there's a measurable impact. It's there. We're detecting it. This should be another voice around the table when we think about the future developments.
And I think with this, I'd like to thank everybody who participated in the study. The research team, we had tons of fun. It's been a long time, many summers that are spent here working with the community. It's been just absolutely a wonderful experience working with all of you.
I think this is a hopeful pathway for really accelerating the transfer of the findings from the study into policy and decision making. And I hope that this would generate policy conversations, that can actually nudge planning and policy with the city, with Ports Toronto. This is very important for the community to be part of the future of their neighborhood.
So what's important about this study, and what can ourselves and other community members do now that we know the findings? First, we know now that when the wind is blowing from the south, the direction of the airport, that there are higher levels of ultrafine particles. The other thing that we know is when planes are taking off and landing, there's actual spikes of the ultrafine particles, so that they go sometimes as high as 200,000 cubic centimeters, which is 10 times more than the World Health Organization has set out in their good practices. These are things that we should care about and that we can take action on now that we know.
With these southerly winds, fine particulate matter is increased. It spikes 2 to 3 times the average into the neighborhood. And that's unacceptable.
We all know that air quality affects our health. And we're not really focused on prevention in this economy right now. It's all about making money, and we have to we're prepared to spend money fixing us after we got sick. And it should be the other way around.
We definitely should not be thinking of expanding the airport. If anything, we should be thinking of greening our waterfront.
Up and down the waterfront, it'd be interesting just to see the difference in how the movements of the air, and because we know it has a much farther reach than just our neighborhood, for sure.
So the real question for the community is, what are we going to do about it? It's not up to the scientists. They've provided us with the findings. It's up to us to decide what we want for ourselves and for the city. Do we want clean air and good health? It's up to us, and we must take action.